speak for about 40 minutes, and then after which he will then address any questions from the audience. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Lukman Raimi. I'm sure all of us are familiar with him. He's an assistant professor and program coordinator in the entrepreneurship major in UBD School of Business and Economics, as well as chair of the Learning and Development Committee at University Brunei Darussalam. I also have some good news to share. Our School of Business here, UBD SBE, has recently been AACSB accredited. So congratulations to the faculty, and we are very happy to have you all here today. So without further ado, I introduce Dr. Lukman, who will begin his seminar. Thank you. You're on mute, Dr. Lukman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sabrina, for that short introduction. And to all the participants from different parts of the world, you're all welcome to this knowledge sharing platform, which we call Seminar Series at the School of Business and Economics, University Brunei Darussalam. So today I will be sharing with you the outcomes, the output, and of course the impact of a research recently concluded entitled Entrepreneurial Governance, Ease of Doing Business and Economic Growth, Evidence from ECOWAS Countries. In line with seminar-based practice, so I'm going to follow this outline strictly. I'll start with the declaration, introduction, and motivation. I'll speak to the problem statement, stroke gap analysis. I'll also progress to the research objectives and research questions. Then I will discuss the empirical reviews and of course the theoretical underpinnings of this particular research. I'll also speak to the methodology, then I will explain the results and conclude with implications and contributions. The research that forms the bedrock of today's seminar series, of course, was funded by the university, specifically under the faculty research grants with the reference number shown before you. So I was the principal investigator, and I have in the team a co-investigator in person of Dr. Azwan, and of course, one of our former MSc students, Tam Pauline, served as the research assistant. So what you are listening to today is actually the output. And in line with the policy of the university, you are expected to share, the outcome, the output, the impact of the funded research. And that's exactly why we are having this particular conversation. So to provide a background, for those who know sub-Saharan Africa or the entire African continent, you are familiar with the concept of economic blocks. So different regions in Africa created economic blocks to promote intra-African trade, openness, entrepreneurship, etc. So some of the prominent blocks in Africa are Common Market for Eastern South Africa, COMESA, South African Development Community, SADC, Economic Organization of West Africa, ECOWAS, among others. The purpose of this particular block, as I have mentioned, is to promote Africa trade, to promote economic development, entrepreneurship, which of course is expected to ultimately improve welfare. So in 1975, ECOWAS was established with sublime aims and objectives, which I mentioned earlier on, part of which is free trade, common union, reduction in transaction costs, tariffs, reduction, removal of other tariff barriers, and more importantly, to ensure trade competitiveness and also to improve income and welfare for citizens, organizations, and of course, the countries under ECOWAS. However, despite the sublime and laudable objective of ECOWAS, these tall objectives are yet to be achieved satisfactorily. And that's exactly the motivation for this particular research. We are looking at the problems, we are investigating the barriers from entrepreneurial lenses. For people who want to know the members of ECOWAS, they are 15 in number, starting with Mali, Senegal, Cape Verde, Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, Guinea, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Niger, Burkina Faso, Benin, Nigeria, Togo, Ghana, and of course, Cote d'Ivoire. So these are the 5 members of this very important regional bloc. What exactly are the gaps we want to fill, or in other words, the problem statement? In the extant literature, a number of studies actually underscore the fact that import, export, and of course, new venture creation in ECOWAS, are hindered by a number of factors or inhibitions, some of which relate to legal issue, weak multilateral governance. When you have many nations trying to do a particular thing, there will be multilateral governance issues, power relation, and of course, infrastructural deficits, road communication, among others. So all these are being investigated from public administration perspective, legal perspective. Also, most of these studies are fragmented in the sense that they are looking at one country, maybe Mali, Nigeria. They are looking at the influence of some institutional environment on firm performance, on employment, on household, on financial inclusion, among others. Literature, as we speak, still lacks what we call an integrative theoretical model, and of course, a cross-country analysis of how ECOWAS institutions interact to foster entrepreneurship and of course, economic growth. People have carried out research on different, factors as they impact economic growth, but looking at entrepreneurial governance is still a very, very new area. People have looked at ease of doing business and economic growth. So the gap we are filling is that we are looking at entrepreneurial governance side by side with ease of doing business and the impact on economic growth. Specifically, our main objective, as stated in our flyer or the e-poster, is to examine constructively the impact of entrepreneurial governance and ease of doing business. These are 2 independent variables which are very, very powerful, but we want to know their impact on economic growth, in ECOWAS economic. And specifically, we have narrowed down our main objective into 5 specific objectives. The first one, we want to understand ways, by which entrepreneurial governance, ease of doing business, and economic growth correlate. So we are looking at the correlation among these 3 important variables. Secondly, we're also looking at the effects of entrepreneurial governance specifically on economic growth. We are trying to dissect, look at them one after the other. The first independent variable on the single independent variable, the first independent variable on the single dependent variable. That's number 2. Number 3, we are looking at the second independent variable, which is ease of doing business on economic growth. At the end of the day, we want to see the performance of this particular relationship. In line with best practice in research, we carried out conceptual review, theoretical review, and empirical review. So for the purpose of this particular seminar, when you talk about entrepreneurial governance, simply put, we are trying to understand how well government and its policies, conform with the principle of entrepreneurship. How well is government entrepreneurial in its policy conception, policy formulation, policy implementation, particularly with regards to entrepreneurship, trade openness, among others. So that is what entrepreneurial governance is looking at. Then the ease of doing business is actually a common concept in the development literature, both in economics and entrepreneurship. But in entrepreneurship, it is used as national level indicator of entrepreneurship, because most of its indicators, things like number of businesses, number of registered businesses, number of new businesses, number of intellectual property, copyright, etc., all these are pure entrepreneurship issues. And more importantly, we are looking at the dependent variable, the predicted, so which is economic growth. And for simplicity, we are looking at the totality of products produced within a given point in time, specifically the GDP and the per capita GDP. But for the purpose of this particular research, we have used the per capita GDP. Furthermore, several studies in entrepreneurship acknowledge that entrepreneurship, of course, impacts economic growth, no doubt about that. Ease of doing business impacts economic growth, no doubt about that. There are only very few research that actually controvert that particular statement. However, there are a number of studies that emphasize the fact that institutional issues, which relates to entrepreneurial governance, actually leads to failure of so many business in Africa. And also, we have seen that import, export, and other documentation processes among ECOWAS countries have actually hindered growth and also entrepreneurship. Once entrepreneurship is hindered, growth will be hindered, because once you hinder entrepreneurship, there won't be new businesses, low employment, low value addition, and that translates at the end of the day to low economic growth. So these are the issues in the literature. Specifically, this particular graphical representation summarizes the views from the empirical review. You can see entrepreneurship on the left-hand side and economic development / economic growth on the right-hand side. If you boost or stimulate level of entrepreneurship at the national level through productive policies, it's going to lead to job creation, development of more business, or what we call venture creation, particularly more SMEs, and also wealth creation for everyone at individual level, at the corporate level, and at the national level. But this cannot be achieved except we have favorable, entrepreneurial, effective, innovative government policy. That's the insight from the literature. Based on this, we now develop our theoretical framework, leveraging what is called institutional theory. So institutional theory has three pillars. The first one, of course, is the normative. The second one is the regulatory, and the third one is the cognitive. So the indicators that actually measure our three variables have been sorted out clearly and positioned in the right place. For instance, to measure entrepreneurial governance, we pick from the World Bank development indicators and other institutional data sources, things like government integrity index, business freedom. Then for the ease of doing business, we pick three important indicators: startup procedure for business registration, time required to start a business, cost of doing business, and for the cognitive, that is an extension of ease of doing business, we pick education index and financial development index. Then for other variables, we call them control variable. We use other macroeconomic data that we have sourced. So we are looking at the impact of our two independent variables on economic growth, particularly GDP per capita. So in all, we are using several indicators, numbering about 13, to represent the two independent variables and our control variable, including the economic growth. So to comprehend the reality of ECOWAS, as I've mentioned, we are using the positivist paradigm. This is purely scientific, not constructivist, not interpretivist. We are using data provided, and we are analyzing using the statistical tools to provide objective answers to our research question. As I have mentioned in the earlier slide, we have entrepreneurial governance as the independent variable, the first one, ease of doing the business, the second one, and economic growth as our dependent variable, while we have a number of control variables to make the analysis robust and also to conform to best practices. So we source the data, as I've mentioned, from World Bank Development Indicator, Human Development Report, and Heritage Foundation. In all 13 indicators we are used, and we conducted correlation analysis and regression analysis. Specifically, we use pooled ordinary league score. So our regression model is as reflected below, which summarizes all our indicators in the right place and in the right time. So at the end of the day, we generated the results. The first one is the correlation analysis. So we want to see the direction of relationship. If entrepreneurial governance is going up, what happens to economic growth? If ease of doing business is going up, what happens to economic growth? And the control variables too, if they are going up or down, what happens to economic growth? So based on the correlation before you, it was established that entrepreneurial governance indicators, which I mentioned earlier on, two of them, government integrity and business freedom, they are positively and moderately correlated with per capita GDP, which is our economic growth. However, the ease of doing business, which measured, entrepreneurship at national level, are negatively and moderately correlated with the economic growth. In other words, ease of doing business impacts, economic growth negatively. And the control variables like investment, trade openness, education, financial development have shown positive and moderate correlation with our GDP or per capita GDP. However, for the correlation estimates, this is the results of our pooled regression, and the interpretation of that, based on our theoretical underpinning, we divided the 13 variables across the three pillars of institution: the regulatory pillar, normative pillar, cognitive pillar. So for the first one, two pillars which was represented by ease of doing business indicators, such as startup procedures, time required to start a business, and cost, of doing business, show negative and significant impact on economic growth, which is really pathetic. And we are going to know the reason for that. We measure some barriers, custom barriers, transportation, communication, time to start your business, registration process, bureaucracy, etc. The normative pillar, represented by entrepreneurial governance indicator like government integrity and business freedom, positively and significantly impact growth. So it means that entrepreneurial governance actually, supports economic growth. It does not harm economic growth, unlike the ease of doing business, which of course have been reported in several World Bank reports, has been very, very negative in Africa. And then finally, the cognitive pillars, represented by education, financial development indicators, also, show positive and significant effect on growth. That means as the level of education and financial development are being augmented and raised in ECOWAS, is having positive impact on economic growth, which is also very good. And the control variables, a number of them showed mixed results, some negative, some positive. Those that shows positive are investment and trade openness indicators have actually shown positive and significant effect on growth, while government size, inflation, population growth have actually, reflected negative and significant effect on economic growth. So we also try to look at the interaction between regulatory pillar and normative pillars, because they are very, very strong in this particular research. And we realize that both also show negative and significant, estimation. So based on our findings, we generated a number of theoretical and practical implications. I've summarized them into 3 for the purpose of this seminar. The first one, the research improved, the knowledge, the understanding of entrepreneurial governance and economic growth nexus from an institutional theoretical standpoint. Ease of doing business is a common concept, both in economics and entrepreneurship, but entrepreneurial governance is quite low. So this particular research has actually underscored the importance of entrepreneurial governance. Secondly, the findings suggest that ease of doing business, government integrity, and business freedom are critical to achieving the foundational objectives of ECOWAS. If ECOWAS must achieve its laudable objective, then the government of those 15 countries must work on ease of doing business. And also government must have integrity, work on corruption, transparency, prudence, and accountability. And there should be level playing ground for business freedom. And finally, the findings underscore the need for institutional reforms, particularly regulatory and normative. Because from the findings, cognitive is doing well, regulatory is not doing well, normative to some extent is also doing well, but needs to be fortified and enriched. Particularly, the issue of cost of doing business is very, very high in Africa. Startup procedure is bureaucratic and frustrating. Time for registering startup is also very long and unencouraging. Trade openness is obscure, and business freedom is also not really good. So in terms of a contribution to knowledge generation, this is a research, and the contribution is that we have conducted that research for about 14 to 16 months. and it went through rigorous peer review, about 4 rounds, before getting published in a Q1 paper with the Journal of Public Affairs, published by Taylor and Francis. So that's the hallmark of our research. It's been published and is generating good impact and the visibility. Secondly, UBD is AACSB accreditation, and so we always value and celebrate thought leadership. Looking at the issues that embed our research, these issues speak to the following SDG targets: decent work and economic growth, SDG 8, no poverty, SDG 1, zero hunger, SDG 2, responsible consumption and production, very core in ECOWAS, SDG 12, peace, justice, and strong institution. We emphasize strong institution through entrepreneurial governance, SDG 16, and then 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. These are fundamental pillars of entrepreneurship, SDG 9. Then when you have economic growth, naturally good health and well-being of the citizens, corporate organization, and the nation at large will be enhanced. And for ECOWAS to actually succeed in achieving its sublime objective, there is need for partnership for the goals, all the 17 targets. And also the paper has also been delivered at the international conference, also sponsored by the university. That is United States Association of Small Business and Entrepreneurship. So it's been delivered in January 2023. And thank you for your rapt attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lukman, for your interesting presentation. We have a question, Dr. Lukman, in the chat box. Congratulations on your paper as well, Dr. Lukman. This is, I believe, the question is, the relationship among the Africa countries is yet to integrate or boost economic growth in development and entrepreneur advancement in Africa by Africans. Does the issue with non-common currency among the ECOWAS countries have an effect on entrepreneurship development and growth, is the question.
Yeah, this is a very nice question. Not really, because all these countries are properly integrated within the international financial system, and they all transact business in dollars. So that is not an issue. And also, if you leave Nigeria for Benin Republic, you can sell your goods in Benin Republic or other West African countries, you know, and you may be paid in their own currency or dollars. But the most important thing is that the goods are not really moving freely because they all produce virtually the same thing, primary product. So if Nigeria industrializes and is able to produce equipment that some of these African countries are buying from China, then Nigeria will make a lot of money. Then if Ghana producing some things that Nigeria is buying from US, Ghana is going to make a lot of money in dollars or in Ghana currency. So the most important thing is not the currency, but the flow of entrepreneurship. Also, the volume of the goods and services and other barriers like the infrastructure, the institution. So all these are more important than the currency issue.
Thank you, Dr. Lukman. From the same person, the question is, of what relevance is our educational curriculum in Africa with more theoretical knowledge over practicals and soft skills? The audience has asked.
Yeah, I attended a training on entrepreneurship recently, and the take home from that particular training is that entrepreneurship education has become like a buzzword. Everyone is, you know, teaching entrepreneurship education. But we need to ask ourselves as universities or higher education institutions, are we teaching entrepreneurship or are we training entrepreneurs? They are two different things. They are two different pedagogies. If you are training entrepreneurs For instance, let me use our university. We have University Startup Center. That is for those who have graduated, alumni and students who are ready to start business now or after graduating. The type of entrepreneurship education you give them, you are training entrepreneurs. But when they are still in school, in science, in engineering, in technology, in business, and they are taking modules in entrepreneurship, you train them in entrepreneurship education. You try to model their mind to have entrepreneurial mindsets. Within 1 or 2 years, they move from entrepreneurial mindset to entrepreneurial intention. Oh, I love this thing. I think I want to be like Jeff Bezos. I think I want to be like Richard Branson. That is intention. And they move from intention to what we call entrepreneurial action, doing that thing really. So at the end of the day, our graduates in the university, some of them will end up as entrepreneurs, some intrapreneurs, some entrepreneurial leaders, because not everyone is cut out to be entrepreneurs. But whatever you have learned from entrepreneurship will be with you forever. If you're a politician, you'll be entrepreneurial. If you're a broadcaster, you'll be entrepreneurial, and you're going to really make impact. So that is what entrepreneurship education wants to do. Not only creating businesses alone, but to turn people to entrepreneurs, entrepreneurial leaders, and people who are entrepreneurial wherever they go. So that is what we need to do. When you do that, then people would naturally pick where they want to belong. You don't give everybody a straight-jacketed, option. You give them varied option.
Thank you, Dr. Lukman. We have a raised hand and also a question in the chat box, but maybe we'll go to the raised hand first. I can invite Rufai Fatai to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Prof. My question is that some of the African countries, for example, they have a border, the custom duty, and the layers like that, whereas you need to pay, or you need to have a custom license and the like. And all these things are affecting the price at which you are supposed to sell some of these products. So how can that? That is my question. Thank you.
Okay, beautiful. In my literature review, especially the empirical review, people talk about that. It's one of the inhibitions, custom documentation, bribery and corruption. So all this added to cost of doing business. So if an European wants to set up business in Togo, in Ghana, and he goes to the registration company, instead of getting that thing done within a week, it takes 6 months. And even that 6 months, you bribe from office to office. And if you want to bring something in, apart from paying government tariff and other thing, custom will get what they call kickback. So all this will add up. At the end of the day, your product will not be competitive. The landing cost will be very, very high. So all these are what entrepreneurial governance wants to do. Once these governments are ready to tackle corruption, to encourage business freedom, government integrity, then all these problems will be over. So we covered that under entrepreneurial governance. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Lukman. Maybe we can go to the chat box first. We have Dr. Shahid Ashafa, who's asked, what's the role of infrastructure development on entrepreneurship growth, and how can government understand the value of such infrastructural development on national growth through research of this nature?
Beautiful. Yeah, it's a very nice question. Another take home, although not new, that I learned in that particular training, you can't teach entrepreneurship education in higher education institution in isolation. Continue to teach it, but you need to create what is called entrepreneurship ecosystem. You work with the private sector and government sector and the social sector to create entrepreneurship ecosystem. Why? Because the infrastructure that you have talked about, government universities, private university may not have enough resources to put them in place. So private sector will help. And the model is what is called triple helix or quadruple helix. Triple helix simply means universities, private sector, and government. But quadruple helix, which is the modern one, is government, private sector, university, and the host community. The host community. If you train entrepreneurs, they are going to the host community. If they don't know the needs of the host community, they are just wasting their time. And if they have identified the problem of the host community, they need to be invested on by the private sector. They pitch the idea for venture capitalists to support them. Venture capitalists will come to campus to see good business ideas, good startups, and they will fund them. In fact, in a particular university in the US, venture capitalists go to the university and ask students to pitch. Then industries too, with problem, they take their problem to university, they pitch to the university, entrepreneurship students, that these are the problems we have. We want prototype, we want solution. So you can see, we pitch to them, they also pitch to you. Oh, they have problem with equipment, they want it to be, the cost to be reduced. They take it to the engineering department or ICT, data science, they pitch. And the student of ICT and their lecturer will look at the problem, develop prototype, and then sell it to the industry. This is how you can make real high-impact entrepreneurship, not by selling nasicator or rice by the roadside. That is subsistence entrepreneurship. So the take-home is that entrepreneurship cannot be taught by university alone. You need collaboration. And that is why in UBD, you have Darussalam, Entrepreneurship Village, and some other ecosystem owner to support the teaching, mentoring of entrepreneurship.
Thank you, Dr. Lukman. I think that also addresses the next question in the chat box. We have Dr. Sanya with his or her hand up. May we invite Dr. Sanya to unmute? Dr. Sanya.
Thank you so much. I'm on. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity given. My prof, good morning, sir. Yes, my question is this. Yes, sir. Well done, sir. My question is this. I want to ask, what can be done by this platform or this group on impacting on the government as well as the university, so that students cannot just be in the university straight on for 3 years, just learning the theoretical aspect of it, and not being allowed to go to industries of their interest. They need to make them to, first of all, show their interest. I want to learn fashion designing. I want to learn radionic. I want to be this. I want to be that. I want to be producing liquid soap, bar soap, and all the rest. They should be given 1 or 2 days of the week to go to the companies where they produce their areas of interest, so that they will be learning theoretical as well as the practical. So before they even leave the university, after graduating, they might have added values to their lives as well as their community, their family, and they could have been self-reliant. Thank you, sir.
Beautiful. So the question that the last person asks is how to boost what is called KSA, knowledge, skills, and ability. You see, what universities are teaching currently are technically outdated if you don't support it with the needs of the industry. We'll still continue to teach them because they are necessary to become educated. But you must complement it with the needs of the industry. And that is why today, beyond what she has said, students who has passed through the university should know a little about data analytics, artificial intelligence, and some other things that fit their profession. You can learn things that are handy. If you want to learn fashion designing, you want to learn how to produce, all these are vocational skills. You can learn them, or you can also learn some modern skills like Python, machine language, and so on and so forth. So the reason for this is that when you get to the industry, they will tell you, apart from your BSc, MSc, what can you do? So university should start doing that. And that's the reason why UBD has internship, community service, exchange program. So when our students embark on DY, full 1 year, so I'm telling you, those of us who are joining from other parts of the world, in UBD, for 1 year, our students will not learn economics, all this theory. They will be outside in different parts of the world, either in Brunei, outside Brunei, in old people's home, in charity home, in industry. They will learn what the industry wants for 1 year. Then in the last part of their academic sojourn, which is the 4th year, they will now come back to do their project and some other things. So when you use this particular model, the student is already prepared for the world of work. So what we are talking about is already ingrained in our own student in UBD. So I want Nigerian university to emulate this. Out of the 4 years, 1 year should be dedicated, not 6 months, 1 year for industrial training in different areas, internship, community development, and other industrial tours and what have you. So that is my recommendation to the last speaker.
Thank you again, Dr. Lukman. We have Abdul Wasiu with his hand raised. We can invite to unmute. But he has, okay, yeah. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Hello, I've sent a message. Thank you.
Okay, let me see your message. What significant role can multilateral government support play in mobilizing funds and require technical support for scholarship and experiential learning in having government supportive artisan? Yeah, you see, the multilateral government at ECOWAS is very, very active, but not at the level of supporting entrepreneurship and TVET, because they believe that once we have a university or we have universities, technical centers, so they will work on their own. It doesn't work like that. So what they can do, the way they plan for budgets, for peacekeeping, budget for festival, budget for ceremony, the ECOWAS countries should also earmark budget for developing entrepreneurship in the region. And they can do that by forming what I call the regional ecosystem, where universities across the region will interact, businesses across the region will interact. For what purpose? To develop business in the region. Look at China. China is doing well, in China, and China is expanding its tentacle even to Africa. It has captured all the market in Africa. Why? It's able to develop a very strong entrepreneurial ecosystem that is giving birth to so many businesses. So that's exactly what we need in ECOWAS. Once we're able to do this, then we'll start creating new startups, growing existing one to be scale up, scalar, and sustainable ventures. If we don't do that, we'll continue to be a consumerist nation. So that is my advice. And also, they can also come up with a scholarship for very good students to attend correct entrepreneurship training in places like Babson, MIT, and there's a place in India too. It's called Entrepreneurial Development Institute India. You learn real entrepreneurship. I was privileged to attend training there, sponsored by World Bank in 2010. You are going to be giving a training of a country, not a training of an institution. So if people mention anything on entrepreneurship, you know what they are talking about. All you need is resources to be able to develop such things. So if Africa is able to do this, those people will come back and take over the Center for Entrepreneurship Development in their respective university. That's my advice.
Thank you, Dr. Lukman. We're going to go to one of the raised hands and back to the chat box. We have Dr. Abdullahi Shoaib. We invite you to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Permit me to join the previous contributors in commending this very insightful and resourceful presentation by Dr. Lukman. More grace to your elbow. I want you to also share your expertise and experience with regards to the question I'm going to put before you. I'm speaking from Nigeria. Over the years, we have seen several governments in Nigeria coming up with very laudable and beautiful, entrepreneurship, programs and policies to mitigate poverty, to enhance, economic empowerment of several sectors in this country. Let me just mention just a few number of them. If you recall, we have a program called Poverty Alleviation Program. We have National Eradication Program. We have National Economic Empowerment and Development Strategy called NEEDS, both at the federal, they are at the state, we have the seat, they are at the local government, we are the leads. Then we also have, programs, like small, medium enterprises, SME. We have programs like a Social Welfare Services Scheme, SOS. We have National Resource Development Conservation Scheme, among others. So what exactly, will you, be able to dissect as the gap or the missing link? Why all these laudable programs that were initiated towards, developing the entrepreneurship skill of the Nigerians, particularly the youth, has not been working? So what will you recommend that we can do differently from what we have currently? Thank you.
This is a very important question, and a number of the World Bank reports and the development report by other institutions have actually discussed this. But as an experienced educator, most of the policies that you are talking about are purely elitist. They were developed by, government, politicians, and technocrats, not with the genuine objective of alleviating poverty or promoting entrepreneurship. Based on what I said earlier, it is not a bottom-up program. Those who are the end users are not part of the policy conceptualization, policy formulators, and policy implementation. You want to implement a policy, the people who are concerned, you have not actually interviewed them. The implementation, they are not part of it. And that's the reason why people came up with triple helix and quadruple helix. For triple helix, you say when you are teaching entrepreneurship in the university, good, university is a stakeholder, but you can't do it alone. You need private sectors who have the fund, the expertise, the resources, and who are going to be the end user of the graduates and also the ideas and everything. They should be there. Then also the government that drives policy. Government may be going to the right direction, but the correct direction is actually the left. So the private sector will tell you that's not the right direction. So when these three are seated, they will be able to formulate the right entrepreneurship policy. Later on, they discovered that even triple helix has its own problem. The end users, which is the host community, you have actually removed them. And that was why they refined triple helix model and came up with quadruple helix model. You bring in the host community. The host community owns the resources. The host community represents the market where you're going to sell the product. The host community represents the place where you're going to site your enterprise. So they are very, very important. When these 5 key stakeholders sit down to look at entrepreneurship policy, they'll be able to see the right, thing to be done. But in our own case, government will just do it and impose on people. And that is why it's not working. Even those who drive it are politicians. They are more concerned about what they get from it. Let me give you the quote from the National Assembly in Nigeria when they describe this particular policy of government some time ago. The policy was driven by a seasoned chief economist, Magno Pakol. I've forgotten the name of that policy. They said they set out to alleviate poverty, but they ended up aggravating poverty. You can see they set out to alleviate poverty with billions of naira, dollars. At the end of the day, instead of alleviating, they aggravated poverty in Nigeria. Why? It is elitist. It is driven by politicians. No bottom-up approach, prudence, transparency, accountability, all these are not part of those policies. University lecturers are not part of the drivers. Chamber of Commerce are not part of the drivers. Manufacturer association are not part of the driver. So it is dead on arrival. It's dead on arrival. So that was my submission.
Thank you, Dr. Lukman. We have about 8 minutes left now. So maybe time for 2 more questions. There's one from the chat box from earlier, from Sahid Sanusi, asking what's the impact of the ease of doing business policy developed by Nigeria government on enterprise growth and FDI flows into the country, which is, yeah.
So ease of doing business index is used by the World Bank to rank how easy it is to do business in different economies. So if you discover that your ranking is low, it means you go and sit down and do the right thing. Reduce the cost of doing business, reduce the time it takes to register business, be welcoming, be attractive. So when you have all these good policy in place, foreign direct investment will come in. But if you don't work on your ease of doing business, then foreign direct investment will not come. And even existing foreign direct investment will even be withdrawn. In the history of Nigeria, Michelin left and several companies because doing business in Nigeria, was found to be very expensive. The same thing is happening in China. Businesses are relocating away from China to other ASEAN countries where cost of doing business is very, very low. So there is a direct relationship between ease of doing business and foreign direct investment. So that is my advice to the person who asked that particular question.
Thank you, Dr. Lukman. We have Ismail Raji with his hand up. We can invite.
Okay, Ismail Raji, go ahead.
Thank you, Paul, for the beautiful and insightful presentation. Actually, the area I want to look at might be quite different from what you said earlier. I think one of the missing links in this area of entrepreneurial governance policies and ease of doing business, it starts to do with the monitoring and evaluation. Like somebody has actually said earlier, that there are several programs and initiatives by government to actually enhance the entrepreneurial governance and ease of doing business in Nigeria as well. But I think we need to look at what are the mechanisms that government has put in place itself to monitor the effectiveness of entrepreneurial governance policy and ease of doing business. So my question is on the monitoring and the evaluation, which go a long way in actually enhance the entrepreneurial governance policy and ease of doing business. So what are the mechanisms in place to monitor those things? Thank you, sir.
If you look at all policies of government, they were developed by experts. And if you check those policies, they have within them monitoring and evaluation process. But when you have corruption and political gangsterism, they are going to ban those monitoring and evaluation policies. Look at budget. Every budget is monitored. The last phase of budget is evaluation. You learn, what's the compliance last year? Is it 100%, 70% before you start another round of budgeting? But the question is, with those monitoring and evaluation, what has changed? Nothing has changed. So the issue of government integrity that we address in this particular research and business freedom, they have taken into consideration the so-called monitoring and evaluation. If government has integrity, then you take into consideration prudence, self-prudence, self-accountability, self-reporting. Today, so many companies were asked to, report their financials. They are reporting. Social responsibility report, they are reporting, but still they have so many unethical practices that they don't report. Similarly for nations. So when you have the right entrepreneurial governance in place, most of these things that you are talking about will work. But without entrepreneurial governance in place, putting the best monitoring and it will not work. Pension scheme in Nigeria, the current one is one of the best in the world. But they started in Nigeria, it's a mess now. People, circumvent the process. So people develop monitoring and evaluation, but if you lack what we call that discipline to respect the status quo, to respect the structure, then nothing will work. So that's what is happening in the case of Nigeria and some West African countries with corrupt system.
Thanks, Dr. Lukman. We have about 3 minutes left, so maybe we can take one more question and the rest can perhaps contact Dr. Lukman via email if there are still burning questions following the close of the seminar. So we'll take one more from the chat box, which is what significant role can multilateral government support play in mobilizing funds and required technical support for scholarship and experiential learning and having government-supported TVET I can't see this word, sorry. Yeah, and business incubation centers and entrepreneurship schools across ECOWAS region for economic growth and development. So that is from Abdul Wasiu again.
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier on. That is a matter of priority. Africans, ECOWAS and some other regions, they have budget for festival, for ceremonies, for religion, for pilgrimage. So let them earmark, budget also for entrepreneurship development across the region. Let them send people to EDI in India, MIT, Harvard, where they learn practical entrepreneurship, how to create and run incubation, how to set up what is called ecosystem. And even now, a concept is also evolving, which is called entrepreneurial university. So where your university become entrepreneurial. It doesn't mean you teach everyone entrepreneur. No. If you teach science, then science should bring out invention, prototypes that could be commercialized, to bring money for the university, to create jobs for graduates, and for graduates also to become millionaires, venture capitalists, and so on and so forth. So all our laboratory, you can turn them to factories. They become laboratory and also factory. There's a university in Morocco currently, I think it's called Mohammed something University. They have agricultural laboratory. That agricultural farm is a lab and it's also a real farm, commercial farm. So you learn real agriculture and you learn theory of agriculture on farm. Then you generate income from that particular agriculture. So that is the type of thing you see in some universities these days. It is called entrepreneurial university. Your agric science or agric engineering should develop tools to be used on your agric farm. The product you produce on your farm should be used by the university canteen. And some of them should be packaged and put in the university's what is called supermarket. Staff will buy from that particular supermarket. You have a university bread, a university bottled water. So you are creating an economy within an economy. So that is the concept of entrepreneurial university. So it's already been practiced by some University Berkeley, California has that model.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lukman. We have a few more questions, but perhaps we can address those offline. I would like to, on behalf of the school, congratulate Dr. Lukman and his colleagues on the publication of the paper related to this seminar series that's been presented today. And thank you everyone today for joining us for this very insightful seminar. And once again, congratulations to our school for being AACSP accredited. And thank you for your time today. We hope to see you again in future seminars. Thank you, Dr. Lukman.
Thank you everyone for attending.
Take care.
Bye for now.